Michael from Mirrors of Consciousness and creator of the Orbifold Tarot. Coming to you with one more, well, there's a couple more left to go. Another Orbifold Basics instructional video. So we've covered quite a bit of ground so far. We've gone through all four elements, all of the numbers from Ace to 10, including an overview of the general cycle. We've gone over elemental dignities and each of the court cards and seeing how the elements combine in each of the court cards. And we've done some kind of sample short 4-card readings with just the 40 minors. And now we're going to add, we'll continue just building step by step by step. We're going to add a few readings, 3 and 4 card readings with the minors and the courts. Still for now, leaving the majors out. We'll save that kind of for the last step to sum it all together. Before I turn the camera around and do those 3 or 4 card readings with the courts shuffled in, I just wanted to show one last thing about a way to look at court cards. So one way too is also to see the court as kind of a grid, so that you have all of the element on one line of the grid. I don't have 4 hands, I'm sorry, so I'm not able to do all 4 levels, all 4 rows. But so each element on each row, air, fire, earth, water, and then in each column have the rank. So kings in one column, knights in the next, queens in the next, pages in the next. That order you can change to suit how you prefer to work, that's no problem. But then you see where each card fits on the grid, how the elements combine. I personally like to go air, fire, water, earth, and then king, knight, queen, earth, page, because it follows that same pattern of air, fire, water, earth, from most subtle to most dense, most subtle to most dense, which means that in the corners you're going to have the most subtle of the court cards, the king of air. Down here in the other corner you're going to have the page of earth, the most dense of the court cards, and then along that diagonal you'll have queen of water, who is in her element, and knight of fire, who's also in his element, and all the different permutations. So I will turn the video around and we'll do a few 4-card readings with the minors and the courts, and going through all of our steps. First step is, what are the elements? Second step, what are the numbers? And then we'll make a third step, sort of, which is linked to the first step, which is, how do the elements combine? How do the elements interact with each other? And then, of course, from there, how do the numbers interact? And that's basically everything that you need to know. It's just a matter then of practice and refinement after that. So, see you in a moment. So I've combined the court cards in with the minors. We still don't have any majors yet in this deck, so it's still an incomplete deck, but we're just developing the skill of seeing how elements combine with each other. So we'll give them a little shuffle. Next up. And for now we won't work with a question, we'll just see how the elements and the numbers interact with each other and show up. Good. There we go. All right. So I wonder if I have any. No. Okay. So we'll do a 4-card reading. Oop. Over. And again, isn't that interesting? We get three elements, but bordered by air and air. So we're looking just at the elements first, then the number, as we did before, same two-step process. So we have a total of 3 elements. We have air, water, and fire. Pretty simple. And the numbers, there's no actual repeating numbers, except if we look at the quartz as being always an 11. So the Queen of Air and the Knight of Air being both 11, but different aspects of 11, are bordering the central elements. What's interesting there then is if, in a way, if we actually somewhat ignore the air element, we can pick it apart a little bit and go, okay, well, it's water, fire, water, fire. That's one way of looking at the elements. Or it's air, fire, water, air. So there's a couple of different ways when a court card shows up of looking at the elemental relationship and the elemental combinations. Perhaps you may not yet be ready to look at 3 elements at a time, and so if that's the case, this is a way to break them up into 2 elements. So it's water, fire, or air, fire, water, air. That's 3 elements, but it's a little bit more simple. So this is perhaps a person that is a thinker and thinking, how is this going to make me feel? Right? That's our Queen of Air, is thinking about how this is going to make me feel, or communicating in a way that's going to create some kind of sensation for her. It's a person who uses thought and planning and intellect for an emotional result. Or it's something that she cares about deeply, that she pours all of her communicative skills into. Then we get an 8 of Fire. This, again, 8 of Fire, remember, is double stability. 8s are double stability. And Fire is action. So it's a very stable set of actions, maybe quite a lot of action, because he's, again, near the end of a cycle. So maybe the person feels overwhelmed by action. And if it is a person who is normally concerned more about how are things going to make that person feel, and how can they use communication and words and thoughts and planning for a feeling result, a lot of action around them is maybe already even going to feel more burdensome than a similar amount of action for someone else. So this may be that for this person, the amount of tasks that they have on the table, the amount of drive that they have, or the amount of drive that is required, feels greater for this person than it would be for someone else who's more accustomed to having lots of action around them. But then we move into a little bit more harmony of emotion. So maybe having lots of stuff going on around them is making them feel overwhelmed, but thankfully they've got a little bit of the water element. The water element is tempering that abundance of fire within them. And by tempering that abundance of fire, by harmonizing that abundance of fire through the 6 of water, that's maybe enabling them to act on their thoughts and act on their intellect a little bit more clearly, rather than get stuck in emotion. Not that they're necessarily getting stuck in emotion, but if this is burdensome, if this 8 here is creating some burden, then the six of water and the tempering between them is now leading that person to better action, better skills in dealing with the requirement for action. So let's move on and do another variation, another combination, and we'll see, yes, there's a court card. So, elements. We actually have the same elements that came out in the previous reading. Air, water, fire, and air again. The proportions are different, though. So we have only one court card, but again we have air actually bordering both sides of the situation. But it's flipped now. So actually, this isn't always how I would do it, but it may be helpful to see how the previous set went, and we can look at the relationship. So there's only 3 elements. In all of these 8 cards, there's only 3 elements. And in both instances, the air element flanks both 4-card readings. But in the center here, the proportion of water and fire is flipped. It's a little bit closer to being balanced because the water element is a little lower and the fire element is containing water, so there's a bit more balance between water and fire, whereas here there was an abundance of fire and a lower amount of water, so that proportion has also kind of switched, but it's lower overall. So we have the same 3 elements, and not only is air flanking the 2, but water is a consistent aspect of the center 2 cards, with a little build of action, a build of fire toward just past the midpoint of the 4-card reading. Speaking of midpoints, if we look at the second stage, the number stage, we have kind of middle numbers, mostly. I said that courts can be considered 11. I also said that courts are bridge cards sometimes, so they're in-betweens. In a similar way that actually 5s are in-betweens. They're bridges between the beginning of a project and the end of a project, or the beginning of a situation and the end of a situation. 4s too are near the middle. So the second reading here is very much a middle path, middle of the way kind of aspect of the situation. So not even considering so much what each individual card means, we get a sense of the overall situation. There's something that is a little bit balanced in the middle, balancing of opposites in the middle, and that it's the midpoint in the whole process for that person. And it could be a midpoint that's starting with a rest, a mental break. Maybe the person just came back from vacation, and they just came back from vacation of mental rest, the 4 being rest and air being the mind, to come to kind of an emotional equilibrium where they're not feeling absent of emotion or such a pure singular emotion, nor are they overwhelmed by their emotions. They're kind of happy, medium, in the middle, but with also some aspect of change, because 5s again are a change card. There's a breakup of some calm, some stagnancy in the 4. If this were a 4 of water, it would be very calm. But there's a little break in that. Well, maybe that break is a beginning of passion, a beginning of action, a beginning of desire between the water and the fire element. And so passion and desire are really appropriate fiery keywords for the Queen of Fire, because the Queen of Fire is also associated with feeling and sensation. And so I said Queen of Fire is sensuality. So maybe this breakup of the stagnancy, or breakup of the midpoint of emotion, is moving into desire and passion and sensuality. And then maybe that sensuality is then leading to also a change, a breakup of this rest or this stagnancy of mental activity into something a little bit more active mentally. Maybe the person is in a situation that they're going to have to think a little bit more about, to plan a little bit more about, and maybe plan differently than what they've done in the past. Now, if the next 4 cards are also the same 3 elements, that will be very weird. Almost. There we go. Got a 2 of Earth. And so now, we actually don't have a court card at all. But if you look at the balance of the elements, remember, step 1 is, what are the elements? So what are the elements? They're air, earth, and another air. So it's mostly air and a little bit of earth. That is very reminiscent of what happens in the page of air. And I'm going to look for the page of air to find it, just to show you. This is very reminiscent of the page of air. The proportion is similar to the page of air, where we have a lot of air and just a little bit of earth. So there's some practicality, but there's also a lot of thinking going on, a lot of mental activity going on. We start out, and so this is actually leading into the step 3 of reading with the Orbifold, which is recognizing the absent cards, not just the absent elements, but the absent cards. And the absent card can be a court card, or it can be a major. So we'll get to the majors soon, but this is leading to the majors, step by step by step. It's leading toward the majors. So the absent card, it's not really there, but we read it into the situation, or we can read it into the situation if it requires more clarity. The absent court is the page of air. But let's pretend it's not there for the moment. We have 2 of air, 2 decisions, duality, choice, convergence, divergence. So 2 of air is usually a choice because it's mind, and choices are usually having to do with mental activity, or choices happen in the mind. It could be a choice of action, but choices happen in the mind. So we've got a decision that needs to be made here in the beginning. Then perhaps that decision is such a heavy decision. It's weighing on the person. It's making the person feel very heavy. It's requiring a lot of consideration, more consideration than maybe some other choices. And maybe the person even feels, even though 10s are usually not necessarily stuckness, in this case it could be that the decision that needs to be made is so heavy, requiring so much thought, that it is making the person feel stuck. And so that stuckness then, perhaps the solution to that, or an aspect of this decision that needs to be made, because remember, step 2 is look at the numbers. These are the common numbers, the 2 2s. They're important. So maybe the solution to this decision is to figure out which choice between the 2, which choice is the most practical choice. That's the earth aspect. And the earth aspect is a 2, which is referring to this 2. It could also be, I mean, in other contexts, the two of Earth can be a balancing or a juggling of two practical aspects. So it could be the juggling of, say, work time and home time, or different things like that. Could be many different things, but that's maybe an aspect of different things, or juggling between a car or a washing machine, or practical things that we all need. We all need transportation. We all need clean clothes, but maybe we only have the resources. Another Earth aspect. Maybe we only have the resources to have one of the two, and so there's a choice that has to be made. But it seems in this situation that it's a choice between an intellectual choice on one hand and a practical choice on the other hand. So this card is maybe speaking to, you should choose the practical one. I know it's a tough decision. This is a tough decision, but the practical decision is probably the best in this situation. And maybe the practical decision enables a merging of the two. Maybe it enables the two opposites of practical and intellectual to merge into a third thing, a compromise. So maybe the most practical decision to make is actually to reach some sort of compromise. And so you can see how overall, even the pattern of the reading, it's very mind-based, but there's a practical element to it, because the proportion of the elements are such, we almost don't even need to read the page in there as if it's there or as if it's not there. The result is very Page of Air like in terms of how we looked at the page earlier. So that gives another example. We'll do one more quick one. More air, more fire, more water. And more water. So we're near the end of a thought cycle. Oops, sorry, I'll move these over. Near the end of a thought cycle, near the end of a plan. The plan is being executed such that there's some balance, a little bit of stability, but also a little bit of movement. It's enabling us to have enough action, enough going on, that the plan doesn't stagnate. The plan can move. So we also have, remember that 3 times 3. So there's a 3 always contained in a 9. So maybe this is 3 people who are going to execute the plan. Maybe the plan is so big that each person executing the plan has 3 main concepts to execute, to realize. And maybe the person that is kind of leading those 3 team members is a very emotional person. They're able to get things done, but they're basing when will these actions provide some emotional completeness for me, followed by the 10 of water, also completeness, emotional, and the 10s being related to a community. We have that aspect as well. So we're maybe going from individual thought, quite complete, a complete plan, but it's the plan of an individual that is then leading through action and perhaps community and cooperation between those that need to execute the plan, leading to a more emotionally fulfilled community. And maybe they get quite fond of each other emotionally. There's maybe not necessarily some conflict. If there was 10 of fire here, that could be more conflicting within the community. Whereas the water, remember the water element tends to draw things together, whereas air tends to disperse things and fire tends to destroy things. So there's those aspects there too. Again, there's many other possible interpretations for these 4 cards, but you start to see how number, element, they show themselves in the reading, and they do wind up telling a story quite clearly. Interesting here, we have those same 3 elements that we started with, air, fire, and water. So those 3 elements seem to be dominating at least the top of this pile, with only 1 earth card, which we could say a lot about in another time, but it's something just to start to notice what it means for another day. But you just notice it, and okay, that's what I notice. I store it away in my subconscious, in my intuition for later. So that's combining the elements and the court cards and how they play out, and this is leading toward a reading with the majors, a full deck of cards in the Orbifold.